Welcome, everybody, to a special segment on Donald Kent Art, where we take an objective look at hate with a small panel discussion responding to the Murros speech on hate. Let me start the show with a disclaimer that we do not in any way, shape, or form call for any kind of acts of hate speech, discrimination, or violence. This is a socio-political analysis of Murros' speech for educational purposes. Let me introduce my guests, two founding members of the White Art Collective. Firstly, the creator of the show Conversations with the Wind and co host of the Imperium Art series and close personal friend. Welcome, Nollis.
Hello, Donald, and hello, Luke, and hello to the audience. It's great to be on again after all this time, and I love these great conversations that we usually have as a result.
Yeah, we've got some big announcements for the public as well coming up shortly, too. So also, I'm very happy to have with me a multi-talented creator from the White Art Collective, singer-songwriter, guitar shredder, martial arts teacher, and up-and-coming visual artist, Luke Mason, a.k.a. Imminent Rain. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, it's an honor to be on here with both of you guys.
Awesome.
Hail so hard.
Hail so hard, my man.
So hard.
Beautiful. So quick announcements before we begin. Nollis and I are starting up a new show on my channel called White Art Community. And essentially the hope is to recapture the energy of the White Art Collective. And so what we're doing is we're creating a show that's based on a weekly theme related to nationalism, white well-being, everything related to our culture and demographics, politics, etc. We're scheduling guest appearances from artists and influencers in our sphere. Our first guest is Josh Neal. So stay tuned for more announcements on that. Also, tune in to my Tuesday show with Patriart from the UK. The show is called Patriotic Art Live. Each week we do a live art session where we do it on a theme, and that theme will be cross-promoted over into the White Art Community show. So don't miss it. That's going to be very enjoyable. So what we're going to do with this show is we're going to start off playing Murros' speech. And then what we'll do is pass the mic around to each of you. You can make a statement or respond to the speech. And then if anyone in the chat wants to chime in and kind of go with the flow, then we'll do that. So let me share the speech here. Are you guys familiar with Murros?
Oh yeah, I've been a big fan of his for many years.
Yes, he's really a revolutionary speaker, and he's not afraid to talk about things. So as we're soon to find out. So I'm gonna just put us on mute here for a second, and we'll get started.
Nowadays, there's a lot of talk about hate crimes. There's an entire body of laws against hate crimes. Everybody seems to be worried about hate. Hate appears to be the gravest problem of our time. But hate is good. Hate gives a structure to our life. Hate gives us a reason to exist, a focus, something to strive for, an identity. Hate is energy, pure energy, provided by Mother Nature herself. Hate enables us to see through lies and pretense and helps us to concentrate on the essential. Hate is democratic. Even the rich and the powerful cannot hate more than their slaves and subjects. And soon, hate may well be all that we have left. Hate emancipates. Without hate for slavery, you cannot break your shackles. And without hate for injustice, there can be no justice. The greatest achievements of the human race have grown from hate and from the ability to control hate. Hate separates humans from animals. Animals do not hate, but humans do. Humans can hate for decades, sometimes their entire life. We can even pass hate on to our children and keep hate alive for centuries. Hate is a sign of abstract intellect, for only humans can hate people they have never seen or met, and only humans can hate concepts and processes. How can we know what love is if we refuse to recognize and understand hate? Love and hate are the two opposite sides of the same coin. Without hate, we are only halflings. In order to be complete, we need hate. Only fools talk endlessly about love, but forget the hate. Hate separates us from the meek and docile masses. Do not fear hate. Do not deny or reject hate. Accept hate, embrace hate, learn to know it and learn to use it. Hate is your most powerful weapon, a hidden source of your strength. Do not deny it from you. What the liberal elite fears most in this world is our ability to hate, because our hate will one day be the most revolutionary force on the planet. Our hate will destroy and create empires.
Wow, powerful stuff. When I first came across that video, I was a little shocked, to be honest. Mainly because we live in a kind of cultural climate that is, quote, hate has no home here, and all this sort of leftist kumbaya talk about, loving and etc. But meanwhile, the the anti-white hatred is institutionalized, and we're living in it all the time. So before I kind of go into my statements on this, let me start with Nullis. Do you want to respond to the video? You're on mute there, bud. Let me see if you can get you off there.
Oh, here I am.
There you go.
So my immediate response would be the poem I wrote, which is Equilibrium, Love and Hate.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel that this emotion has been captured. I see this more as a balance between love and hate.
Okay.
So I would rather put that focus on us mastering the balance between these emotions, both very powerful, very profound and important emotions that we must embrace. As I wrote back in the day when we were talking about Imperium art,
Yeah.
I was talking about embracing the full emotional spectrum. That encapsulates the positives, the negatives, the rage, the love, all these emotions. We have to really capture it all. But hate is a very, very powerful emotion, and we have to be able to face it. And I fully, I find this to be a very powerful message. Do I believe that hate should be our driving force? I would probably say no, it shouldn't be our driving force. I think that I prefer more of a balanced approach, but that's not to say that we should not have and we shouldn't embrace our hate. And I hope that made sense.
Yeah, there's something very cruel about forcing people to suppress righteous anger and natural feelings. If you're torturing, robbing, raping, and killing a people every day, and it's an institutionalized form of hatred, you can't, and then tell them, oh, you're supposed to be loving. It's a very dark kind of gaslighting. Actually, a little discussion I was having with Luke earlier was how we are criticizing the dissident right as being kind of caught up in rage porn and I guess the hatred of the enemy. Luke, do you want to comment on that a bit?
Oh yeah, I think I agree with what Nollis was saying about the balance between love and hate and all the strong emotions that we have. I don't I do believe that it shouldn't be stifled, but at the same time, if that's our only focus, I think we're painting in black and white, and we're not getting the full spectrum of reality if all we're focused on is the rage and the hatred. I think we have to be good at balancing those and putting all those different emotions into use.
So specifically, you and I were noticing recently that when we post things on Twitter, and they could be creative things, philosophical things, that they don't really get a lot of traction. But if you you share some kind of meme that is, really targeting and insulting our enemies, anti-white enemies, then it gets a lot of likes and a lot of interaction. And I've noticed this pattern more and more recently, and I just find it disconcerting in the sense that I feel like we seems to be that we're getting addicted to that in a sense. Like there's an addiction to we love hating in a sense. And what Nellis, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you notice anything of that nature?
I absolutely do, and I think that we have to be very careful that we don't get caught up in our hate. But I don't think that this is what Kai Morris was getting at, and I think that's what I really wanted to say here.
Yeah.
So he's not talking about rage porn. He's not talking about hate for the sake of hate. He's talking about putting a purpose, a goal for that hate. There's a reason why you hate. There's a reason why you love. But the reason why you hate will drive you to do things that you might never want to do or never consider doing if you don't feel that emotion.
Sure.
And so it pushes you beyond your abilities. It's a I don't even want to say the word motivator. It's a force of nature in a way. I think that's the way he's trying to present hate in this context. And so when you're thinking about hate as a force of nature, as something that's inevitable because something is so egregious that the only response to that is hatred, right?
Sure. Sure.
Then you have to channel that hatred in a way that forces you to go through the fire, if you will, and find a new purpose, a new civilizational purpose. And I think that's really what he's trying to get at here. If I'm not misinterpreting his message, but that's kind of the impression that I'm getting.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. I think one of the points that he makes that really stands out for me is how he talks about, without hatred for slavery, without hatred for injustice, how can we free ourselves from these bonds? And that's so eloquently said and so perfectly said, because when the left comes at us with this, like, oh, no hate and hate speech, this and that, and no hate has no home here, and all of their slogans, it's out of context. They're like, well, who's hating who for why?
But
and what,
Donald, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when somebody says that there's no room for hate, then they're hypocrites and liars. When they say that, oh, we just want to love everyone, they're full of shit, excuse my French.
No
and
doubt.
The reason is because everybody hates. And again, this circles back to what Kai Murros is saying, that we have to embrace this honesty. Now, when we talk about religion, and I'm just going to use Christianity as an example, because I know in our spheres we have many different perspectives on this topic. But when you look at Christianity today, and their focus is on love, and yes, it is the main force. The main message is love, absolutely is love, and redemption, and forgiveness. But there's also a very strong emotion. There's a strong hatred of evil. And there is hatred, but the hatred is targeted toward something as a force of nature. It's not targeted toward the individual who's just an avatar of that. So like, for example, let's look at the world we live in today. You can hate the degeneracy that we see around us, right? And I despise it. I hate it.
Yeah.
But does that mean that I have to hate every single individual that's an avatar of this? And to be honest with you, that's a tougher question. It's more complex because now we're talking about human beings, right? Other human beings.
Cultures.
Now, I'm sorry?
Cultures, etc.
Other cultures and everything. But the whole point I'm trying to say here is that I don't hate anyone out of default. So my default setting is I don't hate other people for who they are. I don't hate people for being something they can't help, whether that's being born into a society, a culture, a race, or whatever. That's just the way it is, right? I don't hate anyone. But what I do hate is the things that happen in the name of those things. So, or how should I put it? Maybe not even in the name. What do I hate?
Well,
I hate
there's ideologies that harness hatred. that, yeah.
Well, but there is a biological impetus here. There's also a certain element here that's kind of a part of nature that brings out these elements in them, right?
Mhm.
So you can't really separate it cleanly, but what you can say is that you're not going to hate the individual for the sake of being what they are. You're hating that you're hating that what they represent to you,
Mm.
what it is that's disgusting, repulsive, negative, or evil to you,
Or threatening to you.
right? That's evil. Well, anything that threatens you is evil, right? So I mean, this is a tough one. I'm not gonna,
I know. Let's let Luke chime
Anyway,
in.
I'm sorry. I'm just
Not
like,
at all.
yeah.
No. That's what we're going at here. Is we're wrestling with the data here and the feelings and all of this information. Luke, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Okay, I think Nolus is knocking it out of the park and making some really good points. But before we get too far into this, I want to make a little point about what I think Kai Murros is really talking about when he says hate. And I looked it up, and the Oxford Dictionary defines hate as intense or passionate dislike. That's like the main definition. What I don't hear in that definition, have you guys ever seen the Smurfs?
Yes, of course.
Okay, remember Gargamel, the villain?
Yeah.
Like how obsessed he is with the Smurfs is, to me, that goes beyond hate. That's beyond just an intense dislike. He's just like obsessed and can't do anything unless it's bringing ruin to the Smurfs. And the same could be said about a lot of these kind of like very kind of one-dimensional characters that we see in fiction, like the Shredder from the Ninja Turtles, or Lex Luthor for Superman, or
yes.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of that hatred and a lot of other words that are taboo that we're never supposed to say because it's the oh so holy forbidden word. I think that a lot of these words get saddled with negative energy that is undeserved. Honestly, I don't see hatred as like this like obsession where all you can do is focus on the ruin of that which you don't like. So and when it comes to that, like you guys Nolus mentioned hatred as a force of nature, and I wanted to wrap on that a little bit. When Kai Murros says hate is good, my thoughts are that it's because it's a natural human emotion. And I have a note here, a little quote from one of my favorite books, Might Is Right. It says, natural law makes no false judgments. Its decisions are true and just, even when dreadful. And so in my opinion, I think there's a reason nature creates and sustains hatred, because it's part of our survival instincts and our will to power. And I think it's evident that nature itself has a will to power, as evidenced by evolution and the fact that at the top of the food chain are the most complex and glorious creatures, the predators. And at the top of that is man, who is the predator par excellence because of our intellect and our ability to work in abstract truths.
I think you're tapping into the spirit of Kai Murros now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really beautifully done. I think of you as a very fierce individual. We've known each other a good while, and like your aesthetic and your general philosophy is extremely based and revolutionary, and I admire it a lot. But I always feel like the hatred is like a fire that you're holding, and if you don't find a way to contain it and channel it, and then you can hurt yourself with it, So
if I can interject, the thing I just realized something over the course of this conversation. When we're talking about balance, we're not really talking about the balance between love and hate per se, although there is a balance between the two. What we're really talking about, at least what I'm trying to get through from this conversation, is that what we're really talking about is the balance between love and obsessive love, hate and obsessive hate. So in other words, you embrace your love, you embrace your hate as something natural, But when it goes beyond that, like Luke was saying before, when it becomes an obsession, when it becomes, gargamelized, if you will, then it becomes something perverted. It's a perversion of the original natural emotion.
Hmm.
And now the question is, is that the modern society is telling us to deny half of ourselves by denying hatred.
Right.
Because then you're not being honest with yourself if you deny part of yourself. And again, nobody's saying hate is good or bad or love. Obviously, you want to love more than you want to hate. You want to be in pleasant situations, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to be surrounded by hate. I want to be surrounded by love, right? But we still have to embrace the hatred, the intense dislike of things that are around us, because then that gives, like Kai Murros was saying in his speech, that gives us a context to what love is.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's kind of two different levels to this that we're jumping back and forth. One is the personal level, which is kind of about one's own psychology, spirituality. And then the other level is us as a movement, as the white identitarian movement, and discussing, what is hate in context of that. And we're, as a movement, we're being gaslit, and so I would say for anyone, living under a rock or aggressively ignoring what's happening in the world, we're saturated with cascades of anti-white hate in the media 24/7. The people pushing the hate has no home here agenda are the same people behind critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion, open borders, baseless claims that white supremacy is America's greatest threat, and etc. So meanwhile, that's drawing attention away from the real crimes that are happening every day to us. And they're intimidating us by making public speeches. I just saw the governor of New York make a speech about starting a social media task force to, beat down on hate speech, and we're going after you. And so the anti-racist movement, where we're told not to hate, is actually a veiled way of pointing directly to whites, implying racial guilt, and indirectly threatening us for standing up for our demographic interests. So in other words, it's a form of gaslighting as social engineering. What are your thoughts on that, Luke?
Okay, yeah, I totally see that. And so this to me ties into what Kai was saying about when he said hate separates us from the weak and docile masses.
Yeah.
Hatred is a super strong emotion, and it's strong enough to overcome cowardice. And another quote that I love from Midas Wright is that fear of death is the beginning of slavery.
Wow.
And so, and for instance, one of the groups of people in our society that is not permitted to be meek and docile is soldiers, right? And
Right.
I don't have a lot of military experience, but I've known many military men throughout my life because of being involved in martial arts and even music. A lot of my music friends were in the military because I was in the guard band for a little while. But so what I've learned is that every military propagandizes its soldiers to hate enemies of the state. And my point is that such a powerful natural force, why should the state have a monopoly on that kind of a powerful natural force?
Good point.
And again, that I feel is more aligned with what Kai Murros was saying, is that he was telling us we have to harness the power of our hatred for revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And so, go ahead, Nellis.
Well, to that point, and to the point of this whole thing, really, Solzhenitsyn, I'd like to read a quote from him, if you don't mind.
Of course, go ahead.
So, the most terrifying force of death comes from the hands of men who wanted to be left alone. They try so very hard to mind their own business and provide for themselves and those they love. They resist every impulse to fight back, knowing the forced and permanent change of life that will come from it. They know that the moment they fight back, their lives as they have lived them are over. The moment the men who wanted to be left alone are forced to fight back, it is a form of suicide. They are literally killing off who they used to be, which is why, when forced to take up violence, these men who wanted to be left alone fight with unholy vengeance, against those who murdered their former lives. They fight with raw hate and the drive that cannot be fathomed by those who are merely play acting at politics and terror. True terror will arrive at these people's doors. They will cry, scream, and beg for mercy, but it will fall on deaf ears of the men who just wanted to be left alone.
I've heard that quote before. It's chilling.
And this,
yeah, man, that is intense.
You think about the communist revolution and like all the violence and how the people turned against each other. Nullis is just a really, really appropriate quote. And it's very incredible. The whites are generally very tolerant, but our kindness is killing us. We see the patterns of behavior. We absorb the mental abuse from the media every day. We see the circle closing in on us and our hatred of our situation and the people driving our destruction. So because we deny our racial solidarity and behave as if we still live in a white homogenous society, this anger and hatred is pressurized. And I think when it blows, it's going to go cataclysmic. So, in the Western world is going to have a gigantic paradigm shift when this pops finally. Some would say that it's exactly what our enemies want, though. They've been slapping us in the face repeatedly so that we will, react and fight back. And then they can say, oh, look, this gives us it's essentially a false premise to come down harder on the movement, install more draconian laws, make arrests, it's a kind of a fake, I don't know how to call it, but it's a twisted gaslighting that we're living under. So whites are in a really precarious position. We cannot talk loosely about hatred without playing it into the hands of our enemies. So Nullis, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we're in a very dangerous position. Anything you say will be used against you.
Yeah.
And anything you do will be misinterpreted. You'll be labeled, any kind of negative, pejorative term they can think of, at least to them pejorative, right? I mean, not necessarily to us.
Sure.
But it's neither here nor there. So their whole point is to vilify anything that represents any form of real resistance, and not this fake resistance that the left and these pseudo-intellectual liberals try to present. And of course this I mean, you could say there's controlled opposition. Every opposition is somehow controlled to a degree or another.
Right.
The only time opposition is not controlled is when it's unpredictable, and that's what they're afraid of, because they know that whatever comes out of this will be unpredictable.
Yeah.
So and so we have to be very careful in our speech. We have to be careful as artists in how we express ourselves, because they will use that against us. But at the same time, I strongly believe that we shouldn't hide and we shouldn't lie to ourselves. We shouldn't kill off that side of ourselves just yet. We should embrace it, and we should embrace it, because if we don't, then we don't have control over ourselves anymore. And so we have to be very, very careful how we do this. At the same time, still remaining honest and still being open about who and what we want to achieve.
Yeah, I know. What about you, Luke? What's your thoughts on this whole gaslighting psyop we're living under?
It is really tough, and we absolutely do have to be careful. I think that so the thing is we are in a catch-22 situation. If we fall for the psyop and get mad, they've got us. But they're going to get us anyway on the other side of that. Like whether we go extinct through gradualism, or whether we go extinct through a heroic struggle, they've got both things planned out for us. So I just see the hypocrisy of it, and it reminds me of the part of the speech where Kai said, the greatest achievements of the human race have come from hate, and the ability to control, and I put channel hatred, right?
Yep.
And I, competition for resources is kind of like the old world understanding of power, and it was like a very hard power. But today we have this insidious soft power because we live in such an unnatural society where it's looked down upon to freely admit that you have enemies. And these days, the fiercest competition amounts to a passive aggressive virtue signaling and victimhood contest.
Yeah.
But rest assured, it is still competition. And, people do still hate each other, even though they're playing nice and they're, punching with kid gloves and everything. So it is extremely hypocritical. And I think the great thing about hatred, when he says hate enables us to see through lies and pretense, a weaker emotion wouldn't be sufficient to that task. But hatred is a strong enough emotion to shatter the illusion and to break the spell and undo the programming that we've been subjected to.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it seems like, I don't know how to put this, but life puts you in situations that you would choose not to be in. And then you have to go through those things. And in the end, it forces you to make choices that make you a stronger, more mature person. And I think that's kind of what hatred is. Like this idea of, hate has no home here and anti-da-da-da is infantilizing us. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like emasculating us. I guess that's a little bold to say, but it's trying to shut us up and like put us down and don't express anything. Meanwhile, we're robbing, raping, and killing you. And to me, that is exquisitely cruel. Like it's just profoundly cruel to do to white people. And again, I feel that in general, whites are generally like a very civil kind of people, that we're very generous and polite and all these things. But our kindness is killing us. And so we're going through this challenge. We're going through this kind of shredder, so to speak, where we have to like fight back. And if we don't let the hatred up in a controlled manner, then we're going to get crushed. And so there's that, I think, is what Murros is trying to say there. But I feel like we in the dissident right have to, since we're really the ones out in the forefront in the white identitarian movement, we have to harness that. We have to lead in this regard. We have to find ways in which we can channel that energy productively. And obviously the arts are definitely a great way to do that, but not the only way. We need people going into politics. We need all kinds of things. And there might be, we might have to fight at some point too. So like, yeah, go ahead.
I just thought of something and maybe, just popped into my head just now. No, we don't need to control it. That, and I've always been a proponent, that, right? Saying, we need to balance it. We need to, but the more I'm thinking about it, and it's just right now, I'm just saying, well, why do we need to control our hatred? Why? I'll explain it. We need to control our obsessions. We need to control the fetishization of these emotions.
Yeah, and I was
whether
talking
it's
about
love
rage,
or hate.
Rage porn is a
right.
fetishization of
so we're not. I don't think we need to control hatred at all.
It's an organic force. You know what I'm saying? Like and who can control it? Honestly, I mean,
So we need to embrace it, and so what I'm trying to get at here is and I've always said, we need a balance. We need to make sure that we don't say anything that's awkward or gets us in trouble, and then I start saying, well, yeah, hold on a second. Where do we draw the line here? So where do you draw the line where they invent various forms of hate speech or various forms of hate crimes, and they're just going to, include more and more things into that basket? And so at the end of the day, you can't say anything because it's going to be a hate crime. Where do you draw the line there? And so, that's where you can make the argument that the free speech proponents are like, well, in free speech, you can say anything you want. Bullshit. No. What we're not talking about speech. We're talking about emotion. Like, I want to just say that I have a right to tell somebody or something that I hate this, I hate you,
Yeah.
I hate what this represents, or I hate these people, I hate whatever. I not only do I feel I don't have a right to say it, I am going to say it. Even if I don't have a right to say it, I am going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
I think that's really what this is about. And then of course, now we're going to talk about don't encourage hate crimes and or anything like that. Well, we're not going to encourage the fetishization of hate.
Yeah.
But I think we need to promote the fact that we should embrace hatred just as much, as we need to embrace love. I mean, you can't have one without the other. So I hope that makes sense where I'm going with this.
Well, again, it's a discussion, so it's not like we are at the helm of a giant ship and we're steering these things. It's we're putting these ideas out there for the public, and we will see what the reactions are and what the responses are. But I do feel like there is a gigantic kind of historical organic force of hatred that exists right now. And we can see it getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a tidal wave. And so that is part of the reason why it's important to actually, talk about this and say, hey, we need to get this out in front and, have the same courage that Murros has to discuss these kinds of things. And, keep the revolutionary spirit, but keep our heads on too, not act like a stupid screaming mob, not act like the left, essentially, going in the streets and burning people's shops and just, crazy things. We're not them, so it's a tricky balance because of course there's, like I just said, you how much can you control? You can only really control it in yourself and your sphere of influence. But at the same time, it's coming. And, I think that's sort of something that we as a movement have to talk about. Luke, what are your insights on that?
Man, I really like the distinction that Nolis made, between the actual emotion and the fetishization of the emotion. And I just want to kind of jam on these thoughts for a little bit. When he says love and hate are two opposite sides of the same coin, it reminds me of the natural polarity of yin, yang, solar, lunar, male, female. And then we even see it in other parts of life too, positive and negative in electrical engineering, ones and zeros in software, dominant and tonic, talking about chords and music. And in writing, we see climax and resolution. In art, we see light and shadow. And I see, to me, hatred is as natural as sex. And by stifling this emotion, essentially what the liberal elite are doing is they're turning us into veal. They're pacifying us to the point of slavery. And I got another kind of interesting quote about that. Another one from Might Is Right. It says, "Better far for a free animal to be killed outright than to be mastered, subordinated, and enchained." And Solzhenitsyn talked about something like that in a quote of his, if I'm correct, how he wished that after the fact that he and his countrymen would have resisted the communist revolution goons as they were, hauling everyone off to the gulags. But another thing that I wanted to kind of jam on here is, we talk about, how they're doing this, how they're making us feel guilty and shameful about these natural emotions and maybe why. My favorite quote in this whole speech is when Kai says, "What the liberal elite fears most in this world is our ability to hate, because our hate will one day be the most revolutionary force on the planet. Our hate will destroy and create empires."
Yeah. So
my thoughts on that is that the liberal elite agenda is against the natural order and against nature itself. That is simply because they can't survive in a natural society where nature's gifts of hatred, violence, tribalism, and natural non-monetary based on force hierarchy are allowed to flow freely. And they can't survive in that, and that betrays the fact that they aren't nearly as elite as they've led us to believe. And then that's why they use their media sorcery to manipulate the masses, like to program us to be at war against our own instincts, rather than being at war with them. And I have to agree with Nullis. Like, I don't think hatred is the enemy. I think hatred is natural and good, and it is those who work to stifle the natural order who are the true villains.
Yeah.
And
they're kind
let
of,
me just say one more thing here. Like, you can see like how they programmed us with the media. You could see, like, against violence, there's been all this like peace propaganda. Against hatred, there's been all this love propaganda. Against tribalism, there's been a ton of multicultural propaganda. And against that natural hierarchy, there's been a ton of equality propaganda. Right. It's very clear to see when you analyze it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
That's brilliantly put. I think
it is.
You just nailed it all right there. The playbook of the left is completely anti-natural, and it's almost too simple how they just check off the list. Anything that's natural in the order of things, they propagandize the opposite of it, just as you clearly stated. It's marvelously put.
Donald, another thing with the left is actually very honest about their emotions. They just don't want us to be honest about our emotions.
Totally.
That's the difference. See, they will hate you openly. They will despise you openly. They will not hold back.
Yeah.
And this is what the conservative or this centrist movement that's called right wing, which is not really right wing, they're just centrists,
right?
Who've occupied the right space. These people will never understand that you can't play by their. You have to play by their rules. You can't play by the rules that they prescribe you to play by. You have to play by the rules they play by. The meaning is, let's just talk about it. Okay, let's talk about. Everybody uses liberal arguments, for example, on everything. Freedom of this, rights to do this, rights to do that. And if you look at it, it's really just targeted, weaponized, and used in whatever means possible for them to maintain or acquire power. That's what the left, or this left liberal group. And again, these designations are very fluid. And so we can call it whatever we want to. Globalists, whatever, right? So the point I'm trying to make, though,
Gargamels.
the Gargamels. There you go. So the point I'm trying to make is that they will never lie to you about what they think about you, but they expect you to lie to yourself.
Yeah, it's crazy.
About what you think about them.
Again, gaslighting.
So what we need to say to them is no. If you're gonna tell me. You're not going to tell me how I should think and feel and say and whatever. And you know what? And I hate you. And and you know what else? I despise you.
Yeah.
So like we just have to say it and not feel a taboo. And that, like you said, Donald, that gaslighting, right? And they appeal to your better emotions. That's what they're really trying to do. And they appeal to kind of an inverted, misinterpreted Christian value system. That's not really a Christian value system, in my opinion. Okay. They're just taking out, cherry picking certain elements of it. But if you look at it, don't hate them, right? And this is the message really for the audience, at least. When somebody tells you, you're a hater, right?
Yeah.
And you just got to look at them and say, so what's your point? So, okay.
Yeah. Again, righteous anger leads to hatred. And I just don't I have a lot of experience with narcissists in my life. And so I'm like, I have X-ray vision with these kind of people. I know their tricks. I know how they work. And I hate them for the way that they do that. I hate that they don't have, I don't know what it is. It's just a normal, like they're missing humanity in their mind somehow. They treat other people like pawns in their world. It's disturbing. And this sociopathy is on a mass scale, with massive amounts of political power behind it. And it's in every, you can't watch a TV commercial without seeing something with a subtext to it. Movies, news, even the very laws. I mean, I just completed a series called Equal Training with White Student Transmission, where we deeply got into the education system and how all of this critical race theory is baked into it deeply. And it's all gaslighting. It's all psychopathic, really. And to put this in children's minds,
Mhm.
I mean, how can you not hate people who are doing that to our children? Come on, think about this. If someone does not hate something like that, something's wrong with that person. You see where I'm going with this? Because
Right.
this isn't tolerance. This is weakness. You see
Right.
what I'm saying? You're not like being a pacifist. You're being harmless, and you have to stop the things that are hurting you and your children. So like this is righteous anger, and we shouldn't suppress it.
Right. Right. Well, but it's been ingrained or brainwashed over the last few decades. If you look at almost every movie, every piece of literature that's been promoted, it's in everything, even the music. It's all there. All this brainwashing to create these false tropes, these false, these false heroes. False heroes, false villains. I mean, maybe Gargamel was the hero. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I know. The thing I want to comment on that is that what I've come to the conclusion with whites in general is that we are, and I say this lovingly, we're conformists. We're an in-groups culture. We know how to behave in and among our specialized in-groups. But without groups, foreigners, etc., coming in and brutalizing us, we're still using that in-group behavior with these outsiders, lying to ourselves about things. And so what has to happen for our survival is we have to snap out of that conformist, sheeple mentality. And every single one of us in our own life, in our own way, has to stand up for anything that comes up at any time. And I see more and more and more and more of this. I see a lot of normies that are coming out and carrying the torch against this or that cause. And it's funny because these are things that we knew about years and years ago, and they just woke up and they're like, oh my God, I have to shout this to the world. That's a good thing to see, and I'm sure these people are motivated by some kind of hatred. And obviously hatred for the things that our enemies do.
But this goes back to what Solzhenitsyn was saying too, is that a lot of people do not want to admit to the hatred that they have inside, because once you admit to that hatred that you do have inside, you're going to have to kill off that other side of you. And once you kill that other side of you, there's no coming back from that anymore.
You change, and your family and friends can abuse you for it as well, and that's something I know deeply. I'm sure we all do in this.
Well, but imagine a society of men that have just cast aside this inhibition to hate. Yeah. And then so for them, there's no time anymore to love, because now is the time to hate. Not the time to love.
Powerful. It's interesting. That's in the Bible, and that famous song from the 60s there, to everything there's a season, etc. Luke, do you want to chime in on this?
Oh yeah, man. Nolis, when you mentioned the how we're propagandized so thoroughly, even through music, my first thought was one of my favorite Ozzy Osbourne songs, Crazy Train, learn how to love and forget how to hate. Am I? Oh shoot.
No, we can't hear you, boss.
Oh, bummer. What should I do? Can you hear me now?
I could hear him. I heard him.
Oh, I couldn't hear him. That's odd. Well, just go ahead, Luke.
Okay, yeah. So my main thought on where you guys are going with this. Imagine a society of men that is no longer afraid to hate. And it reminds me another one of my favorite quotes from Might Is Right. It goes, "The world awaits the coming of mighty men of valor, great destroyers, destroyers of all that is vile, angels of death. He who would rule the coming age must be hard, cruel, and deliberately intrepid, for softness assails not successfully the idols of the multitude. Those idols must be smashed into fragments, burnt into ashes." And what I was going to say about that quote is that it's my opinion that the ability to hate is actually part of man's divine nature. Because if you've read any scripture, God hates evil, right? And I think that's the very natural force that is going to, get past this kind of, animalistic cowardice that we feel, where we're so clinging to lives, and to comfort and safety. And I think it pushes us toward the divine side of our nature. It gives us permission to disobey tyranny and to fight as hard as the situation warrants. It gives the warrior permission to stop pulling punches and to do what needs to be done, however ugly, dirty, or unpleasant it may be.
Luke, I would add, and this is what I really wanted to get at before with us using these arguments, we're not fighting tyranny. We're fighting their tyranny. Very specific.
Absolutely.
Targeted. In other words, if there's a tyrant who represents my interests and my goals, damn right I'm going to support that guy. I don't care.
Hell yeah.
Okay. And this is where the left is being very honest, right? They say, we're supporting this system even though it's tyrannical.
Yeah.
But we're supporting it. Now, they're going to paint it with, nice flowers, like, in a VW bus or whatever. But it's the same thing. And what we're doing is we need to say, you know what? Okay, fine. Then I want my tyrant now.
Yeah. This is why a lot of us are unironically fascist on social media, and that putting out any kind of National Socialist memes or historic information on Hitler, National Socialism, all of these various things. Although that's a really complex topic, it's come to symbolize our freedom. It's a taboo thing that is the turning point from which you identify people who know and people who don't know, people who get what's happening to us in the world, as what white genocide is, etc., who's behind it, how it operates, what we have to do, and the history of that, which is actually quite long. And then the people that are on Facebook following community standards, who just they would rather scream at a football team and get in a fight in a bar over a sports game, than actually change their world.
Yeah, they can hate another team, right?
Yeah.
But and then that's a completely abstract, nonsense, right?
Yes.
But that's why panem et circenses, bread and circus games, keep them occupied, right? Focus now. And sorry to interrupt again, Donald, but here's where it gets interesting. You see, in Europe, right, you have like a lot of these soccer supporters, right? The ultras, right? Now, a lot of them are very right wing, and a lot of times you'll see them fighting each other, one team against another team. But then if something else happens, a lot of times, not always, unfortunately, but a lot of times, these ultras, or these some call them the soccer hooligans, right? These guys will be like the backbone of any major unrest that's like kind of a right-wing unrest in Europe. It's a fantastic thing to watch, really. It's just very interesting. It doesn't always happen, and it's not always like that, but it's often like that.
My personal theory is that sports are, and people can fight me over this, but sports are definitely designed to draw away nationalist spirit and put it down a dead end hole. So if you just look at football specifically, I don't know if all sports, I think that's maybe a little ridiculous, but football is like a war sport. You're taking, yardage from the other people. You're throwing a bomb. There's a, it's kind of violent in the the interaction with the tackling, all this stuff. So I don't know. I just feel like psychologically, somehow or other, it's pulling all of our nationalism away.
Well, actually, sports used to be an expression, an organic expression of nationalism at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was when the teams started recruiting mercenaries from all over the world, and the players in the teams were not really representative of the people that supported them.
Sure.
Then that's when this whole thing changed. But up until then, like when you see like World Cup games, you see like the various countries, like rooting for their country, their nation, So there is definitely a very strong element to it. But it's been commercialized. It's been commodified to the point where
there's a task for us right there is to create a nationalist sport. Like create a new sport that.
Well, you don't have to though, Donald. That's the whole thing. All sports is inherently nationalistic. What you need to do is take out the commodification from sport, and you need to start promoting the people from a local, let's say from a town, a city, a country, and only those people are allowed to play in that team. And if you did a real representation of that, and you don't make it a big commercial, a big corporation, right? That's where you can make real change. Unfortunately, any sport that you have out there can be commodified. So creating a new sport won't change anything. You have to change the entire structure of the way it's being done today.
I hear you. We can take some questions and comments from the chat as well. One of my faithful followers here, Simon JJ, great to see you in the chat. He just made a comment. It's been diversified. So that throws out the racial element of it right there. That has its own kind of issue. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit off topic, but it's still an interesting topic and interesting in its sense.
Well, it's a part of the hate question, right? You have one camp that hates the other camp because it's not even hatred; it's a competition, right? So. And that's the thing, they're competing against each other while you're in competition. You're expressing a certain form of hatred. Absolutely.
Certainly hear you. So here's the crazy thing. Just recently, and I forget where this is, maybe somebody in the chat can say, but a fan of some football team just shot another fan of the opposite football team in the news. And this happened like a week ago. Like shot and killed this person. And now this could be one of those news stories where like, this fan shot the other fan. But the fact of the matter is it could be more of a racial topic. I don't know. I didn't look into it. But you know how that works, how they say like, teens at the mall are rioting. Well, what do you mean? What kind of teens? And, that goes down a racial rabbit hole. But
do they have sneakers or?
Yeah, I'm hearing you though. Luke, do you want to jump in a little bit on this?
Yeah, I see that in sports a lot too. A lot of sports I kind of see. Well, I see sports in general as having evolved as more safe and less dangerous forms of warfare. Like football is a really good example. You're gaining territory. You tackle the guy with the ball and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of these sports were developed as ways to still maintain some athleticism, but without getting your head chopped off or getting shot through with an arrow or something. But as far as like the real agenda, like what sports have turned into is I keep on going back to the nature topic because they've just made it less and less natural by, expecting us to treat outsiders as our teammates and mixing everyone together, forcing us together, really people that, and then there's this weird, like kind of cringe virtue signal-y culture where it's like, oh yeah, this is my brother in my team. And I was even watching a movie earlier with the wife, and it was like a cop movie. And of course they've got to have like the white cop and the black cop, and they've got to like force these people together that are actually from different tribes. And, the tribalism, like there's a very good reason that exists, because that conflict and that competition is nature's way of cleaning house, of separating the wheat from the chaff. And without that, our society would be messed up if we didn't have that competition. There would be too many people. There would be all kinds of disease and deformity. There would be, because of the overpopulation, there would be like all this crazy pollution. And it would basically just be this dystopian hellscape of freaks.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're headed if you really look at it. And it kind of reminds me of this other quote I wanted to share, if you guys don't mind.
From what?
It's again from Might Is Right, but it really has to do with.
Who's the author of Might Is Right?
Oh, he used a pseudonym, Ragnar Redbeard, but they think it was this guy. I thought it was Arthur Desmond, but there's also been, conjecture. Yeah, it's a very popular book in certain parts of our sphere. Okay. But the quote says, it's about the laws of nature. He says, "Of course, there are certain higher laws which no one can even try to rebel against without being quietly executed. The transgressor of a natural ordinance may think he has escaped, even while the noose knot is under his chin and the bolt about to be sprung. Nature has a very long arm and a vengeful one. Many a city of the plain has been incinerated beside Sodom and Gomorrah. Individual transgressors of nature are always driven mad, and nations that organize defiance to the nature of their being become regimented hordes of incoherent manlings, sootily perspiring downward to their, quote, heaven, dancing the dance of death, shrieking the songs of progress."
Very, very well said. That sounds like your next song, actually.
I like that.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's like, did you write that? Hold on a sec. But I think what we have to feel here is a hatred for diversity, a forced diversity. The French philosopher Guillaume Faye says that diversity, multiculturalism is like salt in a soup. Too much ruins it. It's like it's okay to have a little in there, but like too much ruins it. And I feel like it's time for us to be unashamed about that. It's okay to be white, as our guest says here in the chat. So that actually is kind of an interesting thing. Is that what are the things that we need to give our people permission to hate openly? It's kind of a tricky question, a touchy question. And anyone in the chat,
you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I just think that we should be very careful about how far we push this kind of anti-natural agenda, because I just feel like it could have extremely negative consequences for our posterity. You were mentioning the commodification of sports, and it kind of reminds me of consumerism. And all these things that we're doing with consumerism, where we only care about getting the dollar and we don't care what happens to the product or the waste product of the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
And then we just get more and more like there's all this planned obsolescence where people have to keep buying the same thing over again because it's made with shoddy materials, and it actually makes these corporations more money, and it's creating more and more garbage and basically destroying the earth. And that's like just one dimension of this like anti-natural scourge that we're enduring. So I think it should be okay to hate something that's going to destroy our world.
Well, transhumanism is the trajectory of all those things too, and that is the most ultimate unnatural thing you could possibly imagine. The cutting man off from God through technology merging with biology. It sounds totally science fiction. 20 years ago, if you told somebody that's actually what's happening or where we're going, they would just think you were a nutcake.
Yeah.
But all the science exists, et cetera, et cetera. This is another reason why fascism is the most maligned and misunderstood and censored ideology because it places man squarely in nature. It puts government below man as the servant of man. Is there any government that actually serves the people on earth? I don't even know.
Well, it depends on how you want to. Yeah, I mean, right.
Yeah, so it's the natural order of things is people first, people before politicians.
Identity before ideology,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the right ideology, before power.
Yeah,
And so maybe that might be a good way to look at it.
that's a very good way to look at it. I feel like communism itself is totally anti-natural. Communism hates God. Think of it that way.
Right.
That's
So does liberalism, by the way.
Oh yeah. I mean, and they're bed partners, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, at least in my view. I mean, some liberals might say, "Oh, that's not true," but I think they're. Donald, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Would you mind if I read this poem, Equilibrium, Love and Hate?
I was hoping you would.
So the reason is because I think it fits really well with
Great.
Kai Murros' video.
Oh, excellent. And just for everyone's information, quick reminder, Nullis is a great poet in the White Art Collective, and he has many, many shows. You have to look up his Conversations with the Wind episodes, which I probably co-hosted, but anyway, he did all the work.
Yes, so you have. Yeah.
I'll let you have the mic.
You're the Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson.
You got it, man.
All right, so let me read this. This poem is available on my YouTube channel. Nullus Abnormocracy is all the Conversations with the Wind archived episodes are also. I have close to 3 seasons worth of material, notoriously long episodes. So you're more than welcome to listen to any of these episodes as well, or any number of poems or translations that I have on my YouTube channel. So here's the poem. Equilibrium, Love and Hate. A thin wire pushing deep into the flesh of your bare feet. Accountability burning the wavering foundation on which you stand. The weight of your ancestors pushing hard with every beat. You walk the fragile tightrope divine providence commands. Screeching souls bellowing from the depths of this damned ravine, their nauseous vomit-inducing stench of hypocrisy. Milksop man-children playing with pathetic figurines. Unprolific spinsters laying waste without progeny. Corporate rebels wear patches of global sponsorship. Corrupt parasites feeding greasy pigs generously. Armies of technocrats constructing lies and censorship, symbols of moralizing filth and degeneracy. You can attempt to circumvent the inevitable. You can deny it as you try to focus on the mundane. Vicious mark of the beast will never be charitable. Your children and your children's children will suffer their... So I have to say this again, sorry. Your children and your children's children will suffer your shame. The cracked bell of a venerable clock tower strikes hoarse, vibrating echoes of forlorn faith and nobility. Zealously denouncing the apostasy of ethnos, salvation through Christ remains the only validity. You take your final steps across this treacherous passage. One thought elevates as you break from this delirium. Undaunted, disciplined brethren, marching in the distance, infinite love and hate, restore your equilibrium. Sorry about stumbling there along the way, but that's
That's fine.
That was beautiful, dude, and that it really fit with that last quote I shared too. I really, man, and everything we're talking about, with the technocracy and the consumerism and the destruction of society and the degeneracy, all the unnatural crap that's going on.
Yeah, you should hate those things. You know what I'm saying?
That's exactly it. You should hate it, and you should not be shamed into not being honest with yourself.
Yes,
that's the bottom line.
And expressing it and organizing around it as well is really the end result. Absolutely. Is doing something either culturally, politically, in some manner, in some level. For myself, as I contemplate this whole thing, this is just me, and I don't know who will resonate with this, but I feel like my approach is to try to take a sort of a stoic warrior mentality towards this topic. I think that, I don't know how to say this, but I'm very concerned with my mental spiritual health, and the hatred I've experienced it. In a sense, I feel like I'm doing the enemy's job by letting hatred like poison my heart and my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're without even touching me, they're hurting me. I'm burning inside. You know, I sound like I'm starting to read a poem here, but but seriously, it hurts. It's uncomfortable. I don't like that sensation, because this is, it's like so disgusting, this shit that you see and hear every day. It's so, I could tell you things. I know everybody who is part of this show, subscribers, people in the dissident right, we know what's going on, and because a lot of this news media is censored and will not make it into the mainstream. It's so much worse than what the mainstream shows. So when you have piles of that in your head all the time, it can really sour you. So my approach to this is to be like, okay, I'm sort of like walk in the fire and not get burned, kind of, to have a certain, essentially to center myself in God. That's what works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, I'm tapping into this, unlimited universal power. And that's where I become protected. I become energized. I become powerful, and I'm clear-headed. So I know how to have the fire of hatred in the crucible of my heart, and then use it wisely. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I'm afraid, is that people in our movement are, they're just too addicted to rage porn, and they're going down a rabbit hole where we're not really effective. We all, and I mean, I'm part of it too. I have fun with the memes and on and on, like it's a culture. But at the same time, I feel like it's just too easy to click buttons on a laptop or a phone, and instead of actually making something. And so this is where I feel like that's how we have to transmute hatred, transmute it, and use an inner alchemy of some kind to say, I really effing hate this situation, so I'm going to make it a point this year to do X, Y, Z, and create some goals for yourself, whatever that might be. A lot of people are into fitness. That's a thing. But, starting a farm or something, starting a business, hiring whites, getting politically active, volunteering in your community, getting involved in education and anti-CRT. There's a million fronts on this war that we're at, and the circle just keeps coming in closer. So, it's just, I see, or I feel that there's just too many people on our side that are just kind of wallowing in the hatred and not actually doing anything with it. That's all I want to say.
Wallowing in anything is bad, right?
Yeah.
Wallowing in self-pity, victimization, hatred of any kind of emotion is bad, I think.
Yeah.
I think that the question to me is more about self-confidence than anything else.
That's a nice way to spin it. Luke, what are your thoughts?
I liked how you were saying how, when you look at all the terrible things in society, like it becomes toxic, and you feel like you're almost being poisoned, by the hatred. But what I wanted to point out is that hatred and that pain, that is also a gift from nature. And nature is telling us, I think, or the divine, if you prefer, is telling us that something needs to change. And that's why we feel that is so that we do, get off the computer and, actually do something, tangible and real with our lives, and build communities and make art and be a part of activism, and prepare and train, and all the positive real life things that we could be doing.
Sure. Yeah. Wow, it's powerful stuff. I think we've gone over this pretty thoroughly. How about maybe some closing thoughts, or again, if anyone in the chat wants to chime in a little bit, you can go ahead. Nullis, I'll let you start.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Luke. You were on fire, like the audience was also saying. Really, really gave great comments today,
So hard.
and both of you. I mean, this conversation made me think about a lot of things as it relates to hate and what that really means. So I'm also evolving, learning, and so I just wanted to thank you for that. And I really hope that the audience is also learning from this process, and we can all find a way to humble ourselves to the task
Yeah.
of learning how to be honest with ourselves. And I think that's probably a good way to wrap it up for me.
Well done. Well done. Luke, you want to go out so hard?
Yeah. It's a tremendous honor for me to get to hang out with you guys. Like, you guys are my heroes, and I totally appreciate and I'm grateful for being included in this. And what a great show! I'm so pleased with the way it turned out. I knew it was going to be great because I know both you guys, and you guys are both so eloquent and well spoken and incisive. Like, you guys really cut to the actual truth of what needs to be said. So yeah, I appreciate both you guys, and yeah, wacky inhales so hard, my friends.
All right. Beautiful. So thanks so much to both of you. I think there's a really nice dynamic here with all of our different perspectives and how we kind of triangulate on these topics. I think really actually it would be great if we could do some more panel discussions on more Kai Murros speeches and maybe possibly some other topics. We will be, Anolis and I are continuing to prepare a new show, the White Art Community Show, and so it's going to be based on a nationalist theme every week, something to do with our people, our movement. We're going to bring in the musicians and the artists and craftspeople and get that White Art community, White Art collective energy going again. So
get the mojo back.
Yeah, big time. And it's certainly going to have a poetry section as well.
Yeah.
We're going to have some Luke Mason Imminent Rain music in there for sure. Anyway, I'm just so grateful to everyone in the audience and for you guys. And I want to thank Kai Murros, who's a personal friend. I'm deeply inspired by him. I adore him to the sky, and he is over the moon that we're doing this and featuring his work and bringing it to life again, putting it out into the public. So anyone out there listening to this, I strongly urge you to look up Kai's speeches online. And also there are a book of speeches on Antelope Hill, Speeches of Kai Murros, which I own as well. He is a really significant figure in our sphere, especially now. He's a revolutionary thinker, and he's someone we really need to pay attention to at this critical moment in history.
Absolutely.
So I just want to say God bless everybody. Stay real and be honest with yourself. And we'll see you next time on Donald Kent Art. Have a good one.